Welcome to Career Biz, the podcast of the University Career Center at UNC Charlotte. I'm Jay, and I'm very excited today to have on the show with us UNC Charlotte alum, Chelsea Glover, who's Assistant Solicitor with Orangeburg County in South Carolina. Chelsea, thank you so much for coming and joining Career Biz.
Thank you for having me, Jay. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So let's start with a little bit about your background and your time at UNC Charlotte, and then where that led you to where you are now.
Okay, perfect. I went to UNC Charlotte from 2012 into 2015. I graduated a year early. In that time, as soon as I graduated, I ended up taking a study abroad period where I studied in London for about 6 weeks through the Department of International Studies. I studied international public relations. After I graduated, I went off to USC. I was at the University of South Carolina School of Law from 2015 to 2018. At that point in time, I had the opportunity to clerk with Judge DeAndre Benjamin, who is a general sessions judge here in South Carolina. After clerking with Judge Benjamin for about a year, I returned home to Orangeburg, South Carolina as an assistant solicitor, where I am currently prosecuting predominantly domestic violence cases and minor crimes.
Well, that is a fantastic journey, and we'll definitely want to circle back and talk about how'd you graduate in 3 years, because that is an accomplishment for sure. But I really wanted to talk to you because we reached out internally and we're looking for guests for Career Bits, and I asked specifically amongst our staff, do you know any alums who've done some interesting work? And my colleague Brooke Brown, who's been on the show before, said, I know just the person, Jay, and she sent me your stuff, and we got a chance to talk. And you were involved in a good bit of work around our recent presidential election. So I want to talk to you a little bit about what you did there. Tell people about the work that you're doing there in South Carolina, and a little bit more about how they could get involved in similar work.
That is a great conversation, Jay, and thank you for bringing it up. With the last election, I worked with the South Carolina Democratic Party as a boiler room attorney. It is a phenomenal opportunity to take part in. I ended up kind of getting involved when I was working at the county level. And they introduced me to a lot of people that work throughout the state. I was introduced to a powerhouse, Ms. Chandra Scott, who is a phenomenal attorney here in the state of South Carolina. And she asked me if I knew any attorneys that would be interested in helping out. And of course, at that time, I was more than thrilled to help out. And I got in contact with as many people as possible. During that time, we got together and we started talking about how, before we even went into the early election period, because this was a phenomenal election period for anyone to really study or take the opportunity to see what truly happened. It was a time where there was a lot of racial divides happening, and there were a lot of traumatic events popping up across the nation, including rioting and things of that sort. But for the first time in a long time, we saw a lot of voter suppression, especially in rural counties. There have been reports across, not just in South Carolina, but across the nation, where people voted more absentee in this election because of the pandemic more than any other election in the past. And because realistically, Republicans are more likely to go out and vote, and Democrats are more likely to serve their vote via absentee or other means, it was important for us to be on the ground running. We started reaching out to some of these small county councils and city councils to make sure that we have people in place 2 months before the election took place to ensure that everyone would have the opportunity to vote. There were a lot of issues that came to the surface that I had no idea were happening in my state, let alone the nation. We really serviced, so many inquiries between the 2 months before the election and then during the election. It was a phenomenal team to be a part of, because I have never been in a room where so many like-minded people, and when I say so many, I'm talking maybe 30 attorneys who all have the same goal, to ensure that everyone receives the opportunity to vote. And it was great to be able to receive calls from all over the state and be able to make sure that we had people on the ground that could voice those concerns. And if we didn't have people there, we had connections where we could send someone out there to ensure that that person's vote was taken or they received the information they needed to receive. And we had a lot of people that had served their time to society and were told that they could not vote. But if you have served your time, and if you have done whatever the courts have required you to do in the state of South Carolina, in a lot of states, you are allowed to cast your vote. And because this was a very tumultuous election, a lot of people were told otherwise. So it was great to have our team there to step in to ensure that no person that wanted to vote didn't receive the opportunity to do so.
You described yourself as a boiler room attorney, and I don't know that that's a phrase most folks know. I know what it is because I'm old and I know what boiler rooms are. But describe what that work was like, especially on the day of election, because well, days of election, we should say, because with the pandemic, we had extended election time this time around.
So being in a boiler room is probably like one of the coolest things that you can experience around election time. You're in a room where you're there for maybe 12 to 14 hours. It's in a location that nobody really knows about. Everybody gets there at a certain period of time. You have your coffee, you have meals delivered throughout the day, and you're just sitting with your cell phone and your computer with everybody around you, just fielding through issues, answering phone calls, responding to emails, addressing any concerns that people have across the state. And it's very cool because we had people from all over the state of South Carolina, people that I would not have met otherwise. And I'm coming from Orangeburg, so even the team that was separate and apart from the team that we had with the boiler room attorneys, if there was some need that happened in my city and I knew that I could send this person to go and help out or go and work it out, it was great to just be in that room, feel that energy, have those connections, and know that everybody was working toward the common goal. It honestly felt like taking the bar again.
I can only imagine. Yeah, that's pretty good. Having in my past worked elections and things, I know what the boiler room is like. But on the election side, where you're working for a candidate and you're still talking to people, you're talking to media, you're trying to get the candidate out here and there, and you're listening to early returns. So I've been in that environment too. So it's a if you're into politics and elections, you can't get a better thing. I mean, it's like a sugar rush the whole time. But though, some folks that were doing it with me, they had never done it, and they're like, never again. But now specifically because, like you mentioned, there were so many issues ancillary to the election that were influencing the election. We had the pandemic, we had all kinds of turmoil societally. Here, what were some of the things that your group was able to do to really address concerns that voters had, and what are some of the continuing efforts going forward with that? Because as we know, the presidential elections every 4 years, but there's elections every year in states and in municipalities.
That is a phenomenal question, Jay. Our team, we work together all year long. We have more hands on deck around election, like election year, every 4 years. That's when majority of us get together and ensure that we have everything in process to proceed into the election and make sure our numbers are categorized in a way where we can predict what issues may take place in the next 4-year term. Some of the biggest issues that we deal with were making sure that in some of these rural areas where there's a huge elderly population where there might not be access to people via Wi-Fi or via quality cell phone towers and things of that sort, was making sure that people had the access to vote. And there were so many rural towns, especially where people were expecting to go to this location and now they're no longer open to the public, or people were trying to cast absentee votes. And for whatever reason, the post office had moved and it was in a county that was too far for them to walk and they didn't have proper transportation. So having people on the ground where you can connect with whoever you need to connect with in that area that provided transportation or could provide information about where people could go to mail out their absentee votes or who they could get in contact with that would come by and actually pick it up. Just making sure we had a team on the ground to ensure that no vote went uncasted.
What was it like too on the other side of that when you realized that this election had record votes cast on both sides about wherever you were? This was an election for turnout, which is amazing in spite of all of the problems we had, that people really turned out to vote in this election.
It was phenomenal, Jay. I can remember being at UNC Charlotte when President Barack Obama won the first time. And I can remember sitting in my dorm room with a lot of the people, and I lived in Lynch Hall at the time. All of us were just congregated in this dorm room, maybe like 40 of us just packed inside, waiting and anticipating to see who the president was going to be. And then fast forward 8 years down the road, and here I am, an attorney in the boiler room working with the South Carolina Democratic Party, where there are hundreds of people around us and we're all kind of packed into this room. And though we're in a pandemic and we have on our mask and we're practicing socially distancing, it was just phenomenal to sit there and watch the elections as if we were watching a draft and watch those numbers all night long and have that anticipation where it's like, okay, well, South Carolina is red and Georgia's blue and this state is this color. And it's just kind of like, okay, what's going to happen? Because at some point in the night, things kind of tipped in the opposite direction. And it's like so much anticipation that you're building, knowing that you did everything that you could absolutely do to ensure that your candidate would win. So when the night ended and we got the results, it was just a phenomenal feeling. It's a great feeling to know that you casted your vote but it's a more amazing feeling when you know that not only did you do what you could for yourself and the people connected to you, but you had a position in one of the biggest national conventions, period. And you work with a group of people to ensure that everything that you could possibly do to ensure that you wanted to see for your client was done. And it was a phenomenal feeling. I genuinely felt like I won the lottery that night.
That's awesome. I can only imagine the buzz around that. Like I say, it was a record night and one that none of us will ever forget, for sure. So I want to back up a little bit and talk about your experiences at UNC Charlotte. Like I said, you graduated in 3 years. That's awesome. So how did you pull that off first? Like what was your plan of action and what did you do to keep yourself moving forward? And did you always know you wanted to go to law school?
That is a phenomenal question, Jay. Thank you for asking it. I came into UNC Charlotte with about 20 credits. I could have graduated high school a year early, but my parents told me if I did, I would have to stay at home in our town and, choose a local university to go to because they just didn't feel like I was mature enough to leave the state yet. So going in with those 20 credits, my first day, and I can remember meeting with my counselor, and I had my 3 years planned out. And my counselor looked at me and was like, "You're an incoming freshman. Like, how do you know what classes you want to take on every level?" And she told me, "You're going to change your major a couple of times." And I was like, "No, I'm not." She was right. I was completely wrong. I went from I went from criminal justice to political science to finally graduating in communication studies with an emphasis in public relations. And throughout that time period, I had the opportunity to have amazing professors, professors that I still have connections with to this day and can pick up the phone and call them and just check in. And to me, like having that camaraderie and having that community meant everything. But I can also say that every summer, I didn't want to be one of those people that just kind of came and chilled on my mom's couch. Not only because my parents were not having it, just because that's just not me.
Yeah.
So, I would find cheat classes because you're still a college kid. It's not like you have access to all the resources in the world. So I'd come back home and maybe pick up some more online classes at our local community college, which is OC Tech. I'd take some classes that I knew that I would maybe struggle with at UNC Charlotte, like Spanish, for example, and then statistics, something that wasn't necessary for my major, but I am not a math whiz at all. So I figured I would utilize my summers to my benefit. And I'd take anywhere from 2 to 6 credits in a summer and then make sure they all transferred in so that when that 3-year mark came, I was eligible to graduate. And it made all the difference because out-of-state tuition is pretty expensive.
Yes, it is indeed. And even in-state tuition is not necessarily cheap either. I think that's great that you had a plan that you knew like, hey, there are certain courses that are not really, necessary for me in terms of what I want to do, but I've got to take them. I'm going to take them in an environment that makes sense for me so you can succeed. And I think that's great planning on your part. And so I have to ask what your study abroad experience was like in London. What did you get to do and where all did you go?
Oh my gosh, that was amazing. So we were stationed at Regent's University in London. And I am from a small town. My city of Orangeburg might have, I don't know, 18,000 people. So it's smaller than UNC Charlotte's campus. So going off to London, I kind of felt like I was in Manhattan. There were a lot of museums. I had the opportunity to connect with a lot of people from various different points in the world, and it was a lot of fun. But I am not a big fan of that type atmosphere. So every weekend we took a trip. I went to Cardiff, Wales, would have never gone, but I did, had a lot of fun. I went to Madrid, Spain, had a phenomenal time. I would move there if I ever got the chance to live internationally. I went to the islands of Corfu in Greece. And oh my God, they have the freshest seafood that you will ever experience in your life.
I've heard that from several people that have gone. Yes.
So much fun. But we just, London is one of those unique places where Europe is so cheap to travel in. It's kind of like being in the United States. They have travel supermarkets that you can kind of log on to on Google and just check out really cheap trips, pick one and just go. So there were a couple of weekends where we just did it and we just got the full experience of being in Europe.
So from those experiences of being in Europe and things, how did that prepare you when you come back in and the work that you're doing now? What were you able to bring back from that cultural immersion to now apply to the things that you do every day?
I think that's a two-part question. I think it goes to culture and experience. I tell people all the time when they're thinking about going to law school, I tell them to think about not doing the stereotypical law school classes. A lot of people come into law school and they study political science. A lot of people come and they study criminal justice or psychology, but find something that you're passionate about. And when you find something that you're passionate about, it gives you the expertise to share information that people around you may not be privy to. And for me, for an example, I studied public relations, and being in London, it's like the public relations capital of the world. So I saw a lot of branding. I saw a lot of social media campaigns. I saw a lot of just overall brand awareness, and bringing that back into being a prosecutor. It's so cool because I can find ways to connect with our community that the average prosecutor would never think to do. For example, I came back home and I started a public relations and a assistant solicitor outreach program where we are tailoring our program towards outreach kids. And we haven't been able to do so much since this pandemic started, but we started with social media. We started with creating a presence online so that teachers and schools would see what we were doing and felt comfortable reaching out to us to come and speak to their children, to come and kind of guide their children. And, I've done a lot of work with other small firms too, and I've helped with social media campaigns. So if I ever decide to shift and transition into the private sector, I know how to market in a way where the average attorney isn't thinking about leveraging social media. They aren't thinking about finding clients on Facebook or Instagram or even Snapchat. And I heard of an artist that I know that Akil Nash, he's one of my good friends. We talked about some of his artwork and how he can secure IPs and trademarks. And he's been using sites from everything from Instagram to Snapchat to Tinder to sell artwork. And it's amazing because it's you creating this environment where it's conducive to your overall success and just finding the things that you're passionate about. And being in London, experiencing that culture, it just it gave me the opportunity to immerse myself in a culture that I wouldn't otherwise experience and around people that I wouldn't otherwise experience. And it made me a go-getter, and it made it so much easier for me to communicate with people that come from backgrounds that are unlike my own.
Chelsea, I think it's excellent that you're talking about a really creative way to approach what a lot of people think is a very straight job. Like, okay, I work at the district attorney's office or whatever. This is what I do. But you're talking about doing communications and marketing and all kinds of other ways to reach out. I don't think people realize the work that you all do as so much public advocates for the public that you serve as well, which is great to talk about. You mentioned your clerkship, and for those that don't know, that's internship for law schools and law students and things. Talk about what that experience was like and be able to work with such a great attorney.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So just to give you some background, I came into law school thinking I wanted to be an entertainment attorney. I wanted to be living in Atlanta or even Charlotte and doing just sports and marketing. But when I got into law school and I started doing different internships, my first internship was with the Court of Appeals with Judge Geathers. It was a 2-month internship, and he is a phenomenal judge, very intelligent. And, when you think about clerking and what you want to do post law school, a lot of people tell you clerk, because when you clerk, you're going to have the experience to see such a vast array of people, of attorneys, how they prepare, how they conduct themselves in court, the types of cases that come before the court, the types of cases that settle right before the trial starts. So when I went to the Court of Appeals, I realized that it was a lot of reading and writing, and that was cool. But at the core, I knew that I was a trial attorney, and I wanted to be in the courtroom, and I wanted to experience the thrill of like seeing how quickly evidence can be placed into the record and then evidence cannot be, just depending on how the judge rules. So I did the Court of Appeals. That was a great experience, but I decided ultimately to clerk. And with my judge, she still is one of the biggest judges in the state of South Carolina. And she's in the capital of South Carolina, which is Columbia. And she is the chief judge for general sessions, which means that she handles state grand jury and everything else. And it was an amazing experience, especially segueing into being a DA / assistant solicitor, because I saw so many cases and I had the opportunities to sit through so many trials, and I could see good lawyering and, not so great lawyering. And it helped me to kind of define what it meant for me to be an attorney and the things that I needed to bring to the table and bring into my office.
Chelsea, that's fantastic, and a great statement for the importance of finding mentors and learning from the experiences around you and making the most of those opportunities. I have one last question for you, and this is a general broad one, but what would you do and how would you advise students to be involved civically and in civic engagement, and why that is so important for their career development and their personal development, and things you would recommend that they do?
I think that everybody should volunteer. I feel like, especially when you are in a position where you have the opportunity to attend any type of university, of course I'm biased and I'm going to say UNC Charlotte, team 49ers all the way. But when you are given the opportunity, with that opportunity comes responsibility. And it is up to you to go back to your communities and spread the knowledge, spread the wisdom. I can remember coming home during breaks and not knowing where I wanted to volunteer. And my mom saying, well, you should go down to the local soup kitchen and help serve. And that was great, but it wasn't really my passion. So I would come back and talk to middle and high school students. And it was so crazy to me to see how many students had never had the opportunity to sit down with a college student and see what that transition was like, or know a person in their family and not have any idea of the direction to go about where to apply for college, where do I want to be, where do I want to study, and know that, going into high school or going into college either, you don't have to decide what the rest of your life will look like. And sometimes you get the greatest opportunities by networking and volunteering with people that are so unlike anyone that you'll ever meet in your career field. And sometimes it's from those people that you get opportunities to do things that you would have never seen yourself doing. I can honestly say that from networking and from volunteering, I've been afforded opportunities to clerk with judges. I've been afforded opportunities to work with the AG's office and to be in the position I am now as an assistant solicitor, because you never know who you're going to meet in those environments, and you never know who they know and who they can connect you to. And that's going to make all the difference in your career, and especially personal development, because everyone, regardless of the career that you go into, you're going to need to know how to communicate. And I meet so many attorneys that, they just lack that skill. So yes, you can do the work, but if you can't bring the clients in, you're not going to be successful. If you don't know how to communicate with opposing counsel, you're not going to be successful. So communication is like so paramount to absolutely everything that we do. And aside from communication, watch the communication you put on social media, because it can come back to bite you, years later, or it can serve as a catalyst that helps you in your career long term.
Absolutely. Excellent advice. Chelsea, thank you so much for being on Career Bits and sharing so much of your experiences with our audience, and for just being such an outstanding representative of the alumni base of UNC Charlotte. We really appreciate the work you're doing. If folks want to follow you and keep up with you, what's the best way to do so?
You can follow me on Instagram at Chel Glover, or you can follow me on Facebook at Chelsea A. Glover. I would love to connect.
Fantastic. Those links will be on the page here if you're watching the video of Career Bits, folks, or they'll be in the description if you're listening to the audio version. So Chelsea, once again, thank you for being on Career Bits with me here today. Folks, you can follow the happenings of the Career Center by going to our website, career.uncc.edu, or following us on social media at Niner Careers. We'll talk to you again soon.